When Mike decided to save an abandoned puppy, he never imagined that within a few months he would discover it wasn't a dog at all. To keep the animal, he would have to completely change his life. As Mike was placing his shopping bags into his car, something on the truck parked nearby grabbed his attention. On the back, there was a small cage with a tiny puppy. Inside it, the dog looked so sad and depressed that it touched Mike's heart straight away. Welcome to my channel of Gill Master Stories. Don't forget to subscribe button and press on the bell icon for more inspiration and mind-blowing stories. But the pup was also beautiful. It had the fluffiest coat he'd ever seen and a pair of sweet eyes. He immediately fell in love with. When the owner of the truck came back, Mike stuck around to speak to him about the puppy and asked where he got it, but what the man had to say was not good. The dog had been abandoned close to his farm, he explained. He and his farm hands kept chasing him off, but it refused to leave. A large road went right past their farm, and they often got unwanted animals that people didn't want dropped off there. They couldn't keep all of them, but they still tried to find them nice homes. But this poor little puppy had made the farmer angry. He must have been hungry, as he didn't have a family to care for him. To be fair, he looked like he should have still been drinking milk from his mom. He had followed his nose in search of food and had found himself inside the chicken coop. He had destroyed a bunch of chickens, and some others had also perished because of the shock of the invasion. The poor farmer had limited resources, and the loss he experienced was devastating. He wanted the pup gone, but couldn't bring himself to do it on his own. Instead, he decided to take the pup to the vet and ask if they could euthanize the dog at a low cost. Hearing this story brought tears to Mike's eyes. He could not allow the puppy to be put down just because he was alone and hungry. He was just doing what came naturally to animals, which was trying to survive. He had to do something, so he offered to take the pup off the man's hands. He was even willing to pay for him so that the farmer could replace some of his animals. In exchange, he would gain a gorgeous puppy and some much-needed company. It was a win-win situation. The man agreed as long as he never saw the dog on his land again. Mike held the pup close, and his whole body relaxed. The sweet boy must have been so scared, and he was grateful that he had come around just in time to save him. Now he only had to figure out what he was going to do with a puppy. He had not planned on getting a dog at that moment. He was living in an apartment without a garden, but eventually he managed to free enough room in his house for the pup to play in. He called the dog Lucky, and the two of them developed an instant bond. Mike wasn't sure if it was because Lucky knew that he had saved him, or if they just had a connection that went beyond anything he had ever experienced, but either way, he had never known that a dog could really become his best friend. They had a lot of fun together, but Mike also had to make sure that Lucky got enough exercise, or he could get frustrated and even slightly distracted. He enjoyed snatching his owner's hats and hoodies, but he wasn't exactly careful with them. The hats were usually chewed up, while the hoodies became his favorite spot to lie on and take naps. Given Lucky's energy and playfulness, Mike assumed that training him and managing him during walks would be a real challenge, but the puppy was surprisingly relaxed and obedient. He was content to work at Mike's pace and explore the forests around them, that is, until he saw other dogs. Then he would absolutely lose his mind. He wanted to play with every dog that he encountered, even the ones that had no interest in becoming his friends. It was really sweet to see, and people would always compliment Mike on his puppy's demeanor. Lucky was a special dog with many talents, but there was one little problem that was hard to handle. He would simply not stop growing. As time went by, he became massive. His black coat became even fluffier, and he grew into a beautiful adult dog. Most people were scared of him, and their reactions pushed Mike to wonder about the dog's large size. He tried to convince himself that it was normal for a wolf dog, but even he had to admit that he was a little worried. What if the dog had some sort of hormone imbalance that was causing him To grow like this, he was scared of what he would hear from the vet, but he had to find out what was going on with his best friend. He hoped everything was fine and that Lucky was simply a very large dog. However, that wasn't what the doctor told him. Mike brought Lucky to the vet's office and walked him inside. The moment the nurse saw the animal, she let out a small scream. They asked him to move to another room, convinced that Lucky would injure another animal or even the humans that were around him. Then Mike knew better, but he didn't argue at this stage. Lucky was only a few months old, but he was already larger than most massive breed dogs. It was interesting to go on walks and see people's reactions when he wanted to make friends with small breed dogs. Mike had to admit that he had some suspicions that Lucky wasn't entirely what he thought he was. He had been convinced that his puppy was the product of two purebred Wolf dogs, but months later he was going to find out that his sweet companion wasn't a dog at all. The vet laughed when he entered and saw Lucky sitting behind Mike with his giant head on his shoulder. The large boy just loved his human, that was for sure, but everything would change in those next few moments. The good news was that Lucky was incredibly healthy and there was nothing wrong with him at all. The other news was that the dog was a Wolf. Sorry for the interruption. Before we continue with the story, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much. To be specific, a full Canadian black wolf with no dogs in his family tree. The reason he was abandoned near the farmer's land remained a mystery. Perhaps his pack had left him behind, or maybe someone had tried to adopt the Wolf pup and realized their error halfway through. Regardless of how it happened, his fate intertwined with Mike's, who had unknowingly been raising him as a loving puppy for months. To say he was shocked was an understatement. Lucky had never shown signs of aggression, and aside from preferring meat to kibble, he had never suspected that he wasn't a normal dog. Domesticated as he was, there was no way that he would ever be able to survive in the wild if Mike set him free now, and at the same time he couldn't keep treating the Wolf in the exact same way as he would have a dog. It wasn't entirely bad news, but it would change. There lives, the vet informed Mike that he had to contact the local wildlife authority, and he wasn't sure what they would decide to do with this situation. Mike lived in the city in a residential house. It wasn't entirely appropriate accommodation for any Wolf, and even less for one of Lucky's size. He was living in someone's backyard, walking among people and playing with pets and children several times smaller than him. Mike had to make some changes in his lifestyle if he wanted to keep his best friend with him. A few days later, a local wildlife inspector came out to see them. He would be the one to decide whether to confiscate the Wolf or to allow Mike to keep him as soon as he saw them together. He could not deny the amazing bond that the man and the Wolf shared, and he decided that he didn't want to break that up if he could help them stay together. The first thing was to get the Wolf out of the city limits. Having a wild animal like that in a town was not okay. Mike sold his place, took all of his assets and savings, and bought a small plot of land that was much more appropriate for raising a Wolf. The inspector had never encountered a situation like this before, so he was also doing his best to handle it appropriately. Most laws were designed to prevent ordinary people from keeping wild animals, and he explained to Mike that he would need to go above and beyond to ensure the Wolf could remain in his care. Most people would just give up, but Mike loved that Wolf like he was his child and would do anything to keep him. Just picturing Lucky going to a shelter or other home and never getting his head scratches again made his blood freeze. It would have been heartbreaking for the Wolf, who loved this human too much for them to be separated, but also for Mike himself. The land gave Lucky a lot of chances to run around and play, but he needed an enclosure that would keep people around him safe. Mike had to get everything ready and up to standard, because there was one huge obstacle that he had to overcome before he could relax. He had to be registered as an animal rescue expert to be able to keep the wild animal, and in order to do so he had to demonstrate he had everything a wild animal could need. So much had changed in a very short while, and Mike wanted to share it with all his friends and family over social media. He started with videos of his little puppy and the big boy he had become, and slowly eased his public into. The news people were astounded when they found out that Lucky was a wolf, but it was the bond between man and beast that really shocked everyone. It was incredible to see just how close they were. The wolf behaved just like a playful puppy, often trying to nibble on Mike's ears or the hood of his hoodie, despite his large size and sharp teeth. He never caused Mike any harm. Well, he was full of energy. The moment Mike scolded him, he would immediately calm down. It was incredible to witness, but unfortunately, the social media posts about him led to some unexpected consequence. His story went viral in no time, as his family shared the cute videos on their own channel, and everything went crazy. From there, some people believed he had made a huge mistake in adopting an animal from a random farmer. Others wanted to know how come he had never suspected Lucky might not be a dog. Some thought that he was doing him a disservice in keeping him with him, but thankfully most comments came from open-minded people who understood he only had Lucky's best interests in mind. These people were invested in the handsome man and his stunning wolf. They wanted to see what the two were up to day after day, and his following grew massively in the space of a few weeks. But Mike didn't care about all of that. He had to focus on getting the place ready for his inspection. He spent all his money on making the enclosure ready for the wolf to sleep in, budgeting the things that were most important. Unfortunately, the inspector did not think that the enclosure was the best place for him. According to him, Lucky needed a lot more room to be comfortable. Mike was planning on letting him out all the time to take long walks and play just like he always did, but for the inspector that didn't matter. The inspector made it clear that all the required parameters had to be met, leaving no room for negotiation. It was an all or nothing situation. He warned Mike that he only had a few weeks to make the necessary changes or Lucky would be taken away. Though the inspector was saddened by the evident bond between them, his hands were tied and there was nothing more he could do. The animal needed to have all his needs met, or he couldn't license Mike as a shelter. In reality, he should have taken the wolf then and there, but he was rooting for the and hoped that they could get it done. His warning was a lifeline, but it did not feel that way to Mike. To him, it felt like the end of the world. He had no chance of ever getting everything done. He had spent all his savings on buying the property and getting it to the point that it was at that stage he was still working his day job in the city, but that would never be enough for all the upgrades. He had to make peace with the fact that he was going to have to say goodbye to Lucky. He wanted to make it as easy on the wolf as possible, so he started to have less contact with him, but that just broke both of their hearts. Lucky got depressed because his friend wasn't playing with him anymore, and Mike didn't know what to do. The wolf was simply too attached to him. Was he even going to survive if they took him from the only family he had ever known? He didn't know, and he was getting sick from thinking about everything bad that could happen. However, something extraordinary happened that changed everything. A friend commented on one of his posts sharing the struggles Mike was going through, which inspired people to come together and support him. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know how they could contribute to helping him get things built properly before Mike could even imagine. He had raised enough money to make all the necessary changes he needed. He later found out that even the inspector had contributed to the cause. When he got back to the farm to check on his progress, he was incredibly happy to see that everything was up to code. He had never been happier to give someone the good news Mike was going to be able to keep his wolf for the rest of his life. The young man rejoiced, and his online supporters cheered with him once again. Mike made sure to spend a lot of time with Lucky and build trust between them. It was a lot less stressful to know that he had all the right paperwork to care for his buddy, and he could finally focus on the proper training, but he wasn't going to stop there. It was great that he could give Lucky a home, but if anything, his relationship with the wolf had only inspired him to do more. There were still a bunch of other animals that needed help too, and Mike now had the right to give them a good home. He just needed the resource forces to do so, seeing how invested people were. And Lucky helped solidify the knowledge that many people want to help animals, but they don't always have the skills or the time to do so, but they are still willing to help others that can. Mike decided to create some Lucky-themed gear and started selling merchandise online. He also received numerous offers from people eager to contribute to the care of the wolf and the other animals, and he gratefully accepted their support. But that wasn't all. People knew about his natural talents with animals, and that meant that each time they heard about wolves or wolf hybrids that needed help, he would be the first call, and Mike couldn't say no to any animal in need. The added bonus was that Lucky got to make friends that he could play with, not quite friends of his own size, since most wolves were smaller than him, but at least ones that could play with him without getting hurt. But he didn't need to stick with wolves either. Any animal that needed help would be taken care of at his sanctuary. For example, most recently he posted videos of the newest additions to the family, a few wild bows that love belly rubs. The man has an incredible talent for bonding with all sorts of animals. The day he found that little puppy in a small crate on the back of the guy's truck was also the day he found his true calling. He has changed so many lives so far, and he doesn't seem to have any plans to stop. His big dream is to create large homes for all the animals in his care, starting with Lucky. That is what he is saving for. Right now, he wants to give the wolf the chance to live as close to the wild as he can, but within the safety of the sanctuary. As a massive animal that loves head scratches, he will never be able to live on his own, but Mike hopes to give him the next best thing someday. Until he can make that a reality, he continues to pour his heart and soul into giving the animals in his care all the love they deserve. Life has changed dramatically since the days in the city when they believed Lucky was just a dog, yet the bond between man and animal remains as strong as